Interesting day. I'm headed up and we're going to do a little bit of surprise. I won't reveal it. Well, it's going to be in the title. So, Dalton Highway. So, I've heard a lot. I've spoken to people about it and there's completely mixed reviews. So, we'll find out what it's about. I am at one of the last fill-ups before the real stretch begins. The next gas station is a little over 100 miles. So, fill up to the tippy top. And off we go. So, should be fun. Today we are headed up towards the Arctic Circle. Yes, starting from Fairbanks, which is the usual place. A funny thing about the Arctic Circle is, well, I should talk about this. This is the Elliott Highway, which is starting up from Fairbanks. The Elliott Highway is actually called Highway 2, but this section of it is called the Elliott Highway, named after some guy named Elliott who helped build it. This highway here was under a lot of construction. It was just pure dirt because the whole area is that the ground freezes so often and it's constantly thawing and freezing, so it's almost impossible to have a stable base underneath the road. So it's constantly in need of repair and major construction, almost on a yearly basis. So this actually gave me little chills because I was like, oh God. This might be tougher than I thought because I'd heard so many mixed reviews of kind of going up this way. As for the road itself, it was very Spartan, and eventually it did actually go to asphalt, but I was fearing like, oh my God, if it's this bad now, I still have like over 150 miles to go before I can even get to the Arctic Circle, the line. So, oh man, it was tenuous right here because I was getting a little shaky about if it's this bad now, how bad is it going to be in another like 100 miles? Because now in lower latitudes, moving 100 miles north or south doesn't really actually mean a whole lot. Now you're near the top of the world, so moving north or south 100 miles actually makes a huge difference in length of sunlight and road conditions. So it was tenuous. Oh God. Now, the Elliott Highway is Highway 2, and it heads up to what's called the Dalton Highway, and then heads north from there. Now, getting up there, there's, it's not as big an accomplishment it was years ago, because years ago, not as many people did it. Now there will be a couple thousand tourists alone who will do it each and every year. It's actually so popular now, is that this used to be the only road for a long time if you wanted, as a civilian, get to the Arctic Circle. There seemed to be only like a few ways to do it. One, you needed to be contractually working for a petroleum petroleum group, or 2, you had to be like with the military, or 3, you had to like get on a dog sled. But now there's actually tourism up here, and as you can see, it's going to slowly like peter out. The wildlife and the plant life will peter out. And in fact, a lot of this area is more or less very swampy. It's incredibly swampy because there's so much snow and there's so much moisture here, and it's only thaws for so long. It doesn't get called a swamp because, well, for probably seven months out of the year, everything's frozen. But it's so popular now that Canada and the Yukon have built their own road up to the Arctic Circle, and the way I hear it, that's actually nicer. But this is heading up north to the Arctic Circle through, some just like spectacular views. The one thing was, it was kind of hard to keep the camera clean because the road has tons of dust, tons of dirt, and it doesn't get driven a whole lot, but it also tends to accumulate a lot of dust and debris just because from everything around. So I constantly had smudges on the camera that I was constantly fighting to fix, or fighting to defeat. I don't know why it keeps doing this. Welcome to the Dalton Highway. Oh wait. This is the highway that goes all the way up. I'll explain what the highway is, but whew. So I'll have to wonder about so just last check, look at the bike to make sure everything's fine, because it's you can even see the pipeline. Yeah, we're way up here. This is Dalton. Lifelong, 1930. He graduated mining in 1937. Naval program, 3-year naval service, Dutch harbor, civil engineer, joined the exploration. Defense effort struck in 1954. Defense effort to construct an early warning system that spread radar coverage across Greenland and the Arctic. As constructed superintendent and became operational.
His death in 1977, another 20 years engineering consultant, interior, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So he was, I guess, one of the main architects of this road, which is not paved. So it can take a while to actually do it. The speed limit is 50. Yeah, so, yeah.
The Dalton Highway. The Dalton Highway, named after James Dalton, as you see, and there's a whole story behind it, and you can look it up and read about it. The basic thing behind the Dalton Highway is when they discovered oil up in the Arctic, obviously people wanted to drill there and get there, and it was actually one, at the time they found it, they thought it was like a godsend because it was in a very remote place, it was far away from people, and it was somewhat easily accessible for humans, sort of accessible to get at the time. So they did this big undertaking to build this pipeline, and obviously they needed a road to service the pipeline. And the Dalton Highway is that highway that goes right next to the pipeline, the Alaska Pipeline. I mean, most people have heard of the Alaska Pipeline, which brings the oil down from the Arctic Ocean all the way to, I think, Anchorage, where it gets loaded on ships, or maybe there's a pipeline all the way down to the refineries. But it's a huge, long pipeline, and the road just follows it with service stations, service stations, service stations.
Whew, the Valley Below members the West. They had a big fire here in 2003. Flames charged 117,000 acres. before being defeated by the July rains. You can imagine it's pretty hard to fight fires up here. Woo! Reading the landscape is not a uniform blanket of trees, stunt altering growth. Yep, permafrost, thaw layer, all this stuff. Woo! Wow. So far the road is interesting, but we keep pushing because it's the morning, and I figure there's less people on it in the morning. So that's the reason why I'm kind of running harder on the morning than I am. So I'll take it slower coming back because I figure there'll be more people on it. So I want to spend more time riding in the morning.
I don't know how many pumps or whatnot it is. They do have some instruction manuals, which one of my previous videos I had visiting one of the pipelines where they kind of explain it, where they send things through to clean out the pipes, to make sure that the oil flows through. You can even kind of walk through kind of the size of it, because the pipeline's literally as tall as me, and I'm like 6 feet, like in diameter. Tons of gas, tons of oil flow through this daily, and it's just an amazing feat of engineering to actually build it up here. And it took, well, it only took a couple of years for them to actually do it. And of course it's built above ground, because they don't want to build it below ground because it would be so much harder to service because of the extreme temperatures. And it is somewhat a marvel feat of engineering because it compressed, so like it has to deal with the extreme temperatures, so it has to be able to like bend and flex with the changes of the season. So this is just amazing. But the real beauty here is just kind of riding through and just seeing the huge and incredible landscapes. Oh my God, they're just spectacular. And just knowing where you are, you're on the top of the world as you're slowly heading up there. Now this video doesn't end at the Arctic Circle, and the next one will. But this is just, you can see it. And you can see in a lot of these things, you can see the pipeline just running along the sides. Now I don't know how many pumps are on there, but I did meet someone who was at pump 2 earlier, like a day before. It can easily take 2 days to go from Fairbanks all the way to the farthest point, which is Dead Horse. And I mean, in this one here, I'm going to stop at the Yukon camp, which is where this crosses the Yukon River, and I'll talk about that. But just looking out here, you might wonder like what kind of wildlife is out here. It's actually the normal type of wildlife. You can see like caribou. There's some kind of yak that's around here. There are grizzly bears. And I don't think too much on the moose. I think we're a little north of the moose, but they might be around here some. The thing is that they're actually even more sparsely populated up here because they can only really be feeding so much. So it only really satisfies so many animals. And I think many of them are a little migratory, which will move a little south during the winter and come back up north during the summer. This is just a beautiful place to go and just drive through. Kind of when you're hitting the halfway point is when you get into the Yukon camp. You'll notice because all of a sudden like service maintenance stops start popping up, and then you see that big long bridge. That bridge is really unusual because it's really at quite a tilt. And you see the Yukon River. Nothing special about the river, but the fact that it's the Yukon River, and you just realize how far north of you, and you're basically at the Yukon camp, which if you're curious, I think has a steady population, a year-round population of, it's either 7 or 13. I think it might be 13 people live here year-round, but for the most part, it swells to a few dozen during the summer, and then down to the 13 during the winter.